I thought I would do, so what's up guys, I thought I would do another video, continuing on from the video I did, this morning, and obviously where I was saying that, I didn't agree with the fact that Chris and Sarah often, rant about stuff and address hate in front of the kids. I was thinking about it, I was thinking, the kids have probably heard so much stuff that they didn't need to hear because, purely because of the fact that Chris and Sarah chose to rant and address hate in front of them instead of doing it in a room where the kids were in it, weren't in earshot and actually hear what was being said, which is probably the better thing to do and the more sensible thing to do. But they would rather sit there and rant and address hate in front of their kids when their kids are in earshot. And to me, I think that's completely out of order. Like, it's sad to think that the kids are obviously so used to hearing their parents ranting and addressing hate in front of them. And they, at the end of the day, kids shouldn't be so used to that. Kids shouldn't be so used to hearing their parents ranting and and addressing hate in front of them. I would hate to be a child to be one of the kids in that house when Chris and Sarah are going off on one like that. Because it can't be that much fun for the kids having to be around Chris and Sarah when they're constantly going off on one like that. They must be treading on eggshells, a lot of the time. It must be awful for them when when their parents are going off on one like that in front of them as well. Like, instead of doing it in a room where the kids are not in earshot and can't actually hear what's being said. Which is what I was saying in the video earlier. Now, as I've said, I'm not saying that they're not allowed to rant or they're not allowed to address hate. I'm in no way saying that. They're perfectly allowed to do that. They're well within their rights to address hate and and rant about something. But what I was saying was they don't need to be doing that in front of the kids. The kids don't need to keep hearing them ranting and addressing hate in front of them. At least do it in a room where they're out of earshot and they're not hearing what's being said. Instead of sitting there ranting in front of them, which I think we all know they shouldn't be doing that, and we all know it's completely and utterly wrong. And I don't think it's a bad thing to be saying, well, they shouldn't be talking about, they shouldn't be ranting or they shouldn't be addressing hate in front of the kids, because as I said earlier, they have actually, we have seen times in the past where they have actually mentioned, addressed negative comments that were being said about the kids in front of the kids. They have done that. They have addressed negative comments that were being said about the kids in front of the kids, and they don't need to do that. They shouldn't be doing, they don't need to be, addressing any sort of hate or any negative comments in front of the kids. The kids don't need to hear, the kids don't need to be hearing that. The kids don't need to be hearing them ranting and calling people scumbags. That's very classy. That is, calling people scumbags in front of your two kids. In front of a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old who are obviously in earshot. And that's something else that they'll probably now start repeating as well, because they've heard them saying it. So they'll probably think, oh, it's okay for us to use words like that, and they'll probably start repeating that as well. It's like, it's just pure stupidity at its very best. And, there were a lot of reasons why I did that video this morning. I guess it was mainly because I was so angry at the fact that they keep ranting and addressing hate in front of the kids, because I just don't feel like they should be doing that. I don't think it's right to be doing that in front of the kids. It's just not on. They don't need to be hearing that. They don't need to be hearing their mum and dad ranting all the time and addressing hate in front of them. It's not doing them any good. They're having to hear that all the time and having to deal with that all the time, having to deal with their parents ranting and addressing hate in front of them. And this is the thing, Chris and Sarah don't really have any shame about doing that in front of their kids. The worst thing about it is that they would actually try to justify it and say they hadn't done anything wrong, which in a way, but at the end of the day, there's no excuses or justifiable justifications for ranting or addressing hate in front of the kids. That's it. At the end of the day, that's completely inexcusable and completely unjustifiable. They don't need to be doing that. And, at the end of the day, some people might think that, they're not doing anything wrong by doing that in front of the kids, but I do. I don't think it's a good idea to be doing that, for them to be doing that in front of the kids. I don't think the kids need to keep hearing that. It's like, they must have a perfectly good reason for wanting to rant and address hate in front of the kids. They must have a perfectly good reason for not going into not doing that in another room where the kids are out of earshot and can't actually hear what they're saying, which would be the more sensible thing to do, and would be more sensible than sitting there and ranting and addressing hate in front of the kids who don't even need to hear that. There's no denying that kids, have probably heard a lot of things that they didn't really need to hear, purely because their parents have chosen to rant and address hate in front of them. It's like, why do they think that's a good idea? Why do they think it's a good idea to be ranting and addressing hate in front of their kids when their kids are in earshot? And, and their kids can hear everything that's being said. It's just completely and utterly wrong and completely and utterly unacceptable. And I'm not going to apologise for saying that they shouldn't be doing that in front of their kids, because I think we all know they shouldn't. And of course the iFan would justify that and say, oh well, they don't do that in front of their kids. Well, actually they do. Because if you watched the vlog the other night when they were ranting about that TikTok video, they were quite clearly doing that in front of Jason Miller. Jason Miller quite clearly in earshot, quite clearly quite close by, quite clearly in the room. Sarah even actually turned around and spoke to Jason. Said to Jason, "Do you remember that time when we locked you in the room?" So they were obviously in the room at the time when Sarah and Chris were addressing the hate and were ranting and addressing the hate. It's not like people say, oh, well, Jason Miller weren't even in the room, which they obviously were. And again, and it's them showing they're willing to rant and address hate and negative comments in front of their kids, and they don't really need to be doing that. I'm not going to apologise for saying that, because it's basically true. At the end of the day, there's no denying that. It's just one of those things that I think really had to be said, and I don't genuinely feel bad about the fact that I said that, because I feel like it had to be said. I feel like it was a point that had to be made, that they shouldn't be ranting or, addressing hate in front of their kids. They don't need to, kids don't need to be hearing that, and kids don't, the kids shouldn't, as I said, it's sad to think that the kids are obviously so used to hearing them doing that, and so used to hearing them ranting and addressing hate in front of them. There's no excuses for that. There's no justifications for that. There really isn't. It's just, inexcusable and unjustifiable. I don't know what else to say. I don't know what else people are supposed to say on this. It has to, they need, there's just no need for it at the end of the day there's no need for them to be, to be ranting and addressing hate in front of their kids. It's like, at least do it in a room where the kids are in earshot, and the kids are not in earshot and can't actually hear what's being said. That would be the best way to do it. As I said, I'm not saying they're not allowed to address hate or they're not allowed to rant about something, but they shouldn't be doing it in front of their kids. And if people think that it's perfectly okay for them to be doing that, they need their heads tested. But how can people think that it's okay for them to be ranting and addressing hate in front of hate and negative comments in front of their kids? There's nothing right about that. There's nothing sensible about that. You know, it's like, how is that even a good thing to do? It's completely stupid is what it is. I don't know. I don't know what else to say. I feel like I have said enough on this already, to be honest. So I hope you've enjoyed this short little video. Just wanted to do a little part 2 to the video I did this morning. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you for another one soon. Bye bye.